For some reason, the recording stopped. So I think you got this part up there with the amplitude is the absolute value of negative A to A. It's called the amplitude. Absolute value of A is the amplitude. Period is 2 pi over W. So with just an X, it's 2 pi. With a 3, it's 2 pi over 3. With a 1/4, it's 2 pi over 1/4, which is 8 pi. T is the period, 2 pi over W. That does one whole cycle of the curve. So this just summarizes it right here. And there will be some problems where they ask you for amplitude and period without actually graphing them. The amplitude is the absolute value of A, so it's 4, because the negative goes away. And this is period is T, is 2 pi over W, 2 pi over 3. The amplitude is 1/2, and the period is 2 pi over negative pi, which over negative pi. So first we have to fix this equation. This is negative 1/2 sine of pi x, because it's odd. Because you can't have a negative period. So this negative moves out to the front because it's odd, and then the period will be 2. Sometimes the period doesn't have pi in it. It has just integers in it. So here's the basic sine graph and the basic cosine graph and some important order pairs. The graph can be broken up into 4 subintervals from 0 to pi over 2, pi over 2 to 0, pi to 3 pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. So it can cosine. And then it begins to repeat its cycle. No matter the change in the function due to transformations, the symmetry in a period will remain constant. We will use the following examples to develop some general shapes. So if we use this example, the amplitude is 4. There's a 4. The period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. The subintervals are from 0 to pi over 4. You divide by 4 because there's 4 subintervals, and 2 pi divided by 4 was pi over 2. That's how they got pi over 2. Divide by 4. So pi over 4, and then pi over 4 to pi over 2, adding another pi over 4. And adding another pi over 4 is pi over 2 to 3 pi over 4. And the last one is 3 pi over 4 to pi. There, that's better. You divide period by 4 to get the 4 intervals, subintervals. And the 5 key points are 0, 0, because it's sine, it starts at 0. And then it goes up to 4, because the amplitude is 4. And then back down to 0. And then 3 pi over 4, negative 4. And pi 0. So if we're going to graph this thing, one, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we're going to graph it, we start at 0, 0 because it's sine, and it goes up, down, down, and back up. And the period is pi. So this is pi over 4. It's divided by 4. And pi over 2 and 3 pi over 4. It's very easy to graph sine. And our last page, I promise tomorrow won't have a lot of notes. It'll just be a little bit of graphing. The last page is right here. The amplitude is 5. This has a negative inside and it's even, so the negative disappears. Cosine 5 cosine pi over 2x, because it's even. Amplitude is 5. Period is 2 pi over 2, which is 4. Divide by 4. That's from 0 to 1. 1 to 2. 2 to 3. And 3 to 4. The key points, remember we're going up to 5, and cosine starts at 5, but it's negative because it's upside down, but then it's not because it stays the same, so it is negative. So 0, negative 5 is where it starts, and then it goes to 1, 0, and then 2, 5, and then 3, 0, and then 4, negative 5. So let's see how that looks. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It starts at negative 5 and goes here and then up and then down and then back. So how do you graph? The key steps. Determine the amplitude and period. Divide the interval 0 to pi over w into 4 subintervals. Divide by 4. Of same length. Divide by 4. Use the endpoints of subintervals to obtain 5 key points. Plot 5 key points and draw the graph. On both example 4 and 5, if plus 2 were added at the end of the function, how would this alter the graph? So what does a plus 2 do to a graph? It would translate up to units. The range would change. The x's wouldn't. The y would change. So find an equation for this graph. So let's look at the origin. Does it go through the origin? No, so it's not sine. It's going to be cosine. So we're going to have a cosine graph. It starts down at negative 3. So the amplitude is 3 and it's negative. Negative 3. So negative 3 cosine. And where does the period end? The period ends at 8. So 8 equals 2 pi over w. 8w equals 2 pi. W equals 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4. You set the period equal to 2 pi over w. So we're going to have pi over 4x. Y equals negative 3 cosine pi over 4x. Your homework, make sure you do it, and I'll post the answers, and then you can remind me if you have a question and I can solve them for you. So there you are. Have a great day, and look for these on Google Classroom and check on Remind as well. Thanks.